Hello, everybody. It is time for another edition of the XP Billionaires podcast. This time, however, we are all very happy because we are very, very much in love. Because you know what? Valentine's Day is coming up in just a few days. And whether I'm actually being serious about being in love or not, well, I like to think that I am. So, yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sky, but
Yeah, I was gonna say you better be in love.
Yeah, yeah.
Why I oughta?
Yeah, that sounds about right. I feel like I deserve that one, maybe. But yeah, I am Rafe Thegrum. I am joined by Sky Knight and the Melzerker, and I should say the wonderful, delightful, who I'm always loving, Sky Knight. That should be a better way to go about it.
Suck up.
A little bit, a little bit. All right. Well, let's see how everyone's doing. Sky, how are you? How are you doing? How is life?
Oh, I'm pretty good. I am well in the midst of playing Atelier Ryza 2 now, and I am completely obsessed. I love it. I love the first one too, but this one just took everything about the first game and made it better. And like, unless they completely screw up the ending, I have a new favorite Atelier game. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, that's amazing. You and I have been fighting over the PS4 for the last week because you've got your obsession with Rise of 2. I've got my obsession with Yakuza Like a Dragon. It it's just like we each got to figure out how to take turns. You're lucky I have models to build right now because ensures that you get time to play. But oh man, for me, I playing Yakuza has been amazing, and I'm actually on a similar boat as you. I'm actually enjoying this game more than any other game in the series so far. I don't know what it is, and it's not just because it's a turn-based RPG. There's just something about Ichiban that is so much more lovable than Kiryu. And it's not that I don't like Kiryu. I think he was an awesome protagonist, but Ichiban has that certain something that I can't put my finger on it. But at the same time, when it comes to the side stories, we've got such a wonderful mix of silly, but at the same time, there are a couple of really heartwarming ones that I've just done. Like I helped a little girl with a donation box because she's trying to get donations for her brother's surgery. Like it was really cute, and I had to deal with these other donation people that were hanging around her that were scamming people, and I ended up like melting their hearts somehow. It was just so adorable, but like everything about this game so far, and I don't even think I'm halfway through it at this point, has been just a ride. And I'm really going for a lot more completionism than I did with the other games. So I'm very excited to see how it continues.
Yes, the battle for the PS4 continues.
Yes, yes, and it will never end. Although it's probably more likely that it'll end when you finish your game, because Atelier games are typically shorter than most RPGs. So eventually.
Yeah, and I'm further through Ryza 2 than you are through Yakuza 7. So
Yeah, exactly. All right, Mel, how have you been? How has your time of life been going?
I'm all right. I kicked a cold to the curb, so yay. And otherwise, I've been a little quiet. I'm still playing Phoenix Rising, just filling my kind of hours with it. But I'm also really enjoying Spiritfarer. It hasn't made me cry yet, but maybe that's because of all the talk about how it promised it would make me cry.
I'm not too familiar with that one, actually.
This is a game where you play a character who is taking over for Karen, the on the river Styx, like taking souls to the afterlife. And you basically find these spirits. They hang out with you on your boat. You make livestock, and you feed them, and you help them kind of make sense of what they experienced in life. And then when they're ready, you bring them to the Everdoor and they go on to whatever's next. And yeah, you just have this like lovely little ship where you're all hanging out, and then at some point someone leaves. It's very good.
How depressing is it?
It's not depressing. It's definitely played like everything's pretty, like everyone cares about each other, everything's nice. It's just like the letting go of someone, right? Of like hearing all the stuff they went through, about, various issues, and then just deciding that, bringing them to the afterlife and them giving you like a heartfelt goodbye. So it's the good pain.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. So anyways, it's been on my list for a while, so I finally made it to the top, and I have been enjoying it. It's I enjoy sitting on the back of my boat and fishing and growing apple trees on my boat, so it's lovely.
The way you're describing it sounds like it's like a mixture of like Harvest Moon and a visual novel.
Yeah, I would say that's a pretty fair description of it. Like,
Okay.
the pitch line of the game is a cozy management game about dying.
I mean, yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and you are you're the Spiritfarer, but you also have your cat, who is also a Spiritfarer. So your cat goes with you everywhere and does all the things with you, and everyone has a super cute animation for when you give them a hug. It's just very, very cute.
No, that's awesome. That's
Yeah.
a very very different kind of game. It's not one I would think to find for myself, but it sounds really neat.
I found it in some kind of list of like the top indie games you should play this year, and I was like, yeah, all right. I'm game for games about death.
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly heard all sorts of good things about it. So, and it's excellent that you've picked up on it.
Awesome. Awesome. Alrighty. Well, like I was saying, it's a few days before Valentine's Day. And since that's happening very soon, I thought it'd be fun to dedicate the next episode or two this month to the idea of love in RPG gaming. But for the first romantic topic that we're going to cover, I thought we'd take a look at the incorporation of dating sim mechanics into RPGs. So, getting into that kind of a hybrid game. So, being able to court your party members allows you to not only get to know them a little bit more, but it also gives each character a little bit more depth. It just makes it feel more like a story. There are a lot of different ways that they can do this in games, and I wanted to just kind of have a discussion on some of the methods to start things off. So I guess my first question is, what are some of the games that have been very effective at adding the dating sim elements to their respective game? Sky, I think we're going to start with you today.
Well, I'm gonna go with the Artelico games and sort of Arno Surge as well, by extension. So basically, they have this thing called the dive system, and basically what the protagonist can do is muck around in one of the spellcaster's subconscious to help them solve their issues and develop magic. Now, all the spellcasters are female and the protagonist is male, and so it can very much take a romantic direction, and does. It's done through a visual novel-esque format, and it's weird, clever, funny, and it can be sometimes really, really sweet. Now, it does also have a fair bit of fan service, and the series' reputation for fan service is somewhat deserved, but I do think people over-focus on that to the point of neglecting everything that makes the series great. And that includes the dating sim elements, um, and the strength of those characters and relationships. This is one of my favorite ways I've seen it done, and one of the best ways I've seen this sort of thing actually become gameplay relevant, because you are as you're getting to know the person better through the dive system, you're also improving their magic. So I really like that about it.
It's a really interesting system, and while yeah, you're right, there is a significant amount of fan service to it. One of the things that a lot of people tend to not think about is like you said, you're diving into a Raventail's subconscious. Like the subconscious is no different than say a dream world. So while this is a little bit more specific because you're able to affect that person's personality, you're in a world where essentially anything can happen. And it's the subconscious is not necessarily rational either. So it really makes for an interesting fact that literally anything can happen.
Well, yeah, that's just it. Some of them, like some of those scenarios become really weird. But another cool thing they do with that is that they use the depictions that show up in the Cosmosphere, that's what they call it. Um, you unlock the costumes as you complete the dive levels. So you can get some pretty strange costumes for your spellcasters, but that just makes it more fun, and sort of as a reminder of oh yeah, that was a thing that happened. And plus,
And
like they also, one of the things I like about the system is that the protagonist sees both the good and the bad of a person's personality this way, and often falls in love with them regardless. So, like, there's a real sort of acceptance of the spellcaster, the Raventail, as a whole in that romantic relationship. That's a really effective way of focusing on a romantic subplot.
yeah, I think you're absolutely right. All right, Mel, what's a good example that you've got?
Well, so part of me wanted to talk about Persona because I love Persona, but I was like, I always talk about Persona. I want to talk about another game series that I like. So I'm going to talk about one that I fell in love with like a decade ago, and it's Fire Emblem. The first Fire Emblem game I played was Sacred Stones. And I'm going to use this as an example, but a lot of the things I'm going to talk about are kind of consistent throughout the Fire Emblem series. But one of the things I like is the way that they combine who you stand next to in battle and who you fight with getting a stronger relationship. So in Sacred Stones, I played as Erica and I romanced Seth, who's like your royal knight. So it's kind of the obvious romance, but kind of you get this feeling of like they learn to fight side by side. They learn, like, he learns to respect her as a fighter. And it builds to this like sense of like, oh, okay, this is a relationship that is built on not only like those little asides you get, but also from the fact that they're fighting and becoming closer allies. And I also think it's really fun because it kind of adds a level of challenge. Like there'd be certain people who I'd be like, oh, I kind of want to stand by them because they would be a cool bonus. But I'd be like, no, I can't ruin that relationship. So I've got to move them over here. So I think it's kind of fun. I think it's really interesting to combine the people who are in your party with how the relationships progress. It's one of those things I really wish a lot of games would pay attention to. Like it always kind of annoys me that Persona never acknowledges the fact that, like, maybe I never bring Yosuke on a fight.
Yeah, no, of course. But no, I completely agree here. Personally, I think that Fire Emblem Awakening was the one that did it the best when it came to that, because not only did just you pair off your protagonist, you could pair off other people, and and then you got to see what their future children would look like, which I think was one of the most interesting aspects of that game. And I know Fire Emblem Fates tried to do it, but they didn't integrate that mechanic as well as Awakening did, in my opinion. And yeah, that was the best way to go about it. Like having just finished Fire Emblem Three Houses, I really liked the concept of having tea with respective people and getting your bond up that way. I mean, it was fairly repetitive and kind of silly, and you didn't get a lot of character building through that. But once you got to the asides, the actual scenes where the bonds would go up, then you got to get to know them. So you kind of had to work your way to getting it, which was nice. But
Mhm.
yeah, like they did it really well. And I was thinking about talking about Fire Emblem myself, but my choice was I decided to go with something I barely talk about, so it's going to be interesting.
Yeah. I'm excited to hear it.
All right, well then, why don't we then?
Let us go
Yeah,
therein and this mystery
yeah.
explore.
Um, so one of the games that I remember that had this dating element is a very old game for the PlayStation 1 called Thousand Arms. It was a this is very interesting and very interestingly animated JRPG. I'm like the combat mechanics of the game, like when you got into a fight, the actual animation kind of reminded me of Dragon's Lair for some reason. I know like it wasn't as detailed, but it had a similar feel to it. But anyway, um, so the premise here is that you're the main character whose name was Mice, and he is an apprentice blacksmith out on a journey. And as you build your party, it would eventually involve a lot of different women. You would get the opportunity to take them out on dates when you were in towns, when you're at the inn, that kind of thing. And but the more you build your affection with them, the more helpful they would be in improving your blacksmithing skill and making weapons better, crafting new stuff, that kind of thing. It's been a really long time since I've played the game at all, so I don't remember all of the major details, but blacksmithing was a huge part of the game as you were progressing. And but the dates would play out similarly to visual novels. You got to say the right things. But I mean, it eventually got to the point where I would remember after sleeping in an inn, I'd hear the voice of one of the girls on the black screen. They'd either have come into my room to wake up Mice, or they were already in there from, going to bed with him. I'm not entirely sure. Um, I think there was a lot of implication. It was really hard to say for certain, but Mice was definitely a womanizer, and he kind of showed it with his blacksmithing.
Yeah, a lot of those early attempts didn't really think through the consequences of the protagonist, like the realistic consequences of the protagonist um, dating multiple people.
Well, I mean, at the same time, I would also argue that a lot of harem animes don't do that either, and
That's true.
it's also had a very good feel towards it as well. So
So basically playing into that trope.
yeah, like it was also very rare when I would see a scenario where in any type of video game where a protagonist would see consequences for doing that. I think one of the few times I've even heard of it was Persona 5. If you ended up like dating too many people, your Valentine's Day would be ruined by all of the women. Um, can't remember exactly how it goes, but I think I watched the video of it on YouTube of it being super funny. But
The classic harem ending where you're just hanging out, everyone just keeps showing up one after another.
yeah, and then they're all mad at you, and then yeah. So yeah, like that's it. And I think we'll get a little more into that in a little bit. Um, but I want to get to the next bit here. So I was thinking about it when we were prepping for the episode, but I was wondering, like, what do you guys think is more effective in a dating sim RPG hybrid? Having a pre-made protagonist like the Persona protagonists, or say Reen from Trails of Cold Steel, or a created character, something like out of a BioWare title where you can actually build some background or anything like that.
I actually don't think it matters very much in most cases. Um, create a character stuff is usually, I'm not saying exclusively, but usually mainly cosmetic or battle combat oriented. Rarely does anything in the create a character really impact the romances beyond, sadly, selecting gender, if that's an option even.
Yeah.
But I mean, I really don't care either way. So that might color my opinion on this one. It's just like this is firmly in the category for me. So I'll let Mel take it from here.
Yeah,
Alrighty.
tag team. Yeah, I guess in general, I would say I am a fan of pre-made protagonists. It's nice when you have a few options or something, but it gives me a sense of at least the idea that things are planned out. Um, More and more, like we used to have a lot of games that would give you like, a dozen different options of what to say. And that feels like it's someone I'm making. But a lot of times now you get like two or three options, maybe four. And like I can rationalize in my head that like, okay, these are the ideas going through this person's head, right? When Commander Shepard's saying something, I can rationalize that like these are the three kinds of approaches. But if that's not something I would do, I really, really struggle with feeling engaged, especially in early game. So that's my kind of personal preference. I just think it leads to like a cleaner experience. And yeah, especially if there's like a strong romance element to it, I think it's easier to dive in.
Not an RPG, but one of the things I liked about Dreamfall chapters is that when you moused over any conversation option, you got a more detailed thought from the protagonist voiced over about it. And it really helped flesh out those options. And I really think, and now there are some, there's some romance related stuff in that game, but it's not a focus. But I really think that that added little bit of context would really help in a lot of games that have romances.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with those that where it's not exactly clear what the option means.
Yeah, and I mean, I get it. Like, some games. This is also why I often prefer unvoiced main characters. Like, it's just there's something about kind of like when I'm playing, let's say Dragon Age Origins, right, which had no voice acting. I could read this full long description of what my character was going to say exactly. But, in other games, you have to give me a short little pithy thing because otherwise I'm reading the person saying it and then the voice actor is saying it later. And it doesn't feel as good. So I don't know. You can do it well, but like that sounds like a really good way to handle it, right? Is to give a bit more context.
Yeah, see, this is kind of one of those things where, well, I completely understand, but there's a part of me that does disagree with the thought of a created character. Um, like it doesn't happen that often. Like you don't get a lot of games, at least by comparison, if you were to go between Western and JRPGs that involve the created character system. But like I think like the main character you made in say Dragon Age Origins really kind of lets you dig into the kind of character you wanted to build. Like you had, race, you had background, whether you were noble, were you whatever. What was your like what kind of history that your family has had, that kind of thing. And I think that helps define who you want to play. But I feel like that also helps you define where you want to, what kind of characters you want to see him interacting with, who you want to see him both on, a friendship and on a relationship level. Um, and then that even implies whether or not you want to, want to connect with anyone. If you want to just play this snobby, pompous person who thinks he's better than everyone else, then maybe that hero doesn't deserve a romantic ending. So I guess for me, like it's like pre-made characters, you've got the set person, you think you kind of get the connection between the two as you progress with them, but with the created character you get more of what you want out of who you're playing. And I think that really kind of helps. I think that's actually a bit more personable to the gameplay experience.
Now let's add a caveat to that though. The how good is the creative character? Do you have options that you can relate to or that you that can represent you or the person you, at the very least, you want to play in the game. That's the problem I often run into with create a character being a non-binary person, right? Like, still the vast majority of games won't even allow me to select the correct gender, much less any, or, you know, lack of gender, you know, much less any other aspect of the create a character. So, I mean, it depends on your demographic, I think, to a certain extent.
I guess that makes a good point. There hasn't been a lot of, I haven't played a lot of games with created characters that really let me go into that kind of depth. So, I mean, it would be interesting to see what else is out there and what, and I guess this is also kind of alluding into the next question here. Like, it would give us an idea, but what elements do you guys think are missing in this in the hybrid and that you'd like to see more of? So yeah, Sky, I mean, you were just at it. What else do you think, if anything?
Well, the main thing I would like to see is the dating sim slash romantic elements better integrated into the RPG format. There are some games that do it fairly well, but honestly, in a lot of video games, romances are treated as a separate thing from the main story or gameplay. So, why do it at all if it's not going to be relevant to anything else? Give me combat perks or significant special story scenes or changes. Don't just give me one scene of the couple getting together and leave it at that. That's not how relationships work, and it should have an impact on the story as a whole. Even if it's just, a scene the night before the major battle or whatever, like give me something in the context of what's going on in the story.
Or even better yet, add some personal stakes to it. I mean, it would be interesting if your romantic partner, who you decide to romance throughout the game, if it happened a little earlier on in the game, for example, then make give her character permadeath, and then have it like change the main character throughout the course of the game, like make it like a different story path.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of different things you can do, and I really don't think this is an element that's treated seriously enough by developers in terms of how it can enrich the game as a whole. Just basically just don't shoehorn it in. Like, no, I understand they're just trying to feed the fans stuff they want, blah blah blah. But you know what? If you're gonna do it well.
No, that makes total sense. I agree. All right, Mel, what's missing? What's missing in your romantic games?
I think it pulls off that a little bit. I think the main thing for me is that I dislike how often you sort of have to like decide from the beginning who you want to romance, put all your attention into them, and then once you're just locked in. Like it very much feels like, I saw so and so, they were hot, and I put every bit of attention into trying to date them. And I wish there was more of a like getting to know each other stuff, or like, like we talked about Persona earlier, where, you get all the girls showing up and being angry at Valentine's Day. Like maybe for a while I was seeing so and so and then I go date someone else. Like that's not the end of the world. And I mean, a lot of games, and I'm gonna use Persona again, will have characters released over time, right? So, like, I've never been able to finish Naoto or Haru's romance plots, even though I love both of them. Haru is definitely like my non-canon girl, I guess, in 5. But you basically have to just decide as soon as you meet them, like, okay, now we are dating, and every time you're available, I am going to completely blow off everyone else to spend time with you. And it's just, I don't know, there's this shame that there's not like we're seeing each other and then, maybe you don't hang out with them as much and they're like, oh, okay, well that was fun, but maybe we're not into each other. Or, like there isn't a sense of relationships ebbing and flowing. It's always just like always moving forward. And that kind of bugs me.
Yeah, there's some more flexibility would be awfully nice at times, because like if you start again a Persona example, you lock in on one girl at the beginning of the story and go like, oh yeah, she's awesome, let's try to get them into a relationship. And then by the time, your favorite character of all time comes around, 20 hours later and you're like, well, shit, I regret everything.
Yeah, it feels almost like a punishment. Like, well, you should have read all the character bios before the game started.
And it's just like, but I was trying to avoid spoilers.
Yeah, like if I date the first girl and then I'm like, oh, never mind. There should be some kind of like, I don't know, not necessarily just breakup mechanic, but also just like, oh, I'm clearly seeing so and so now.
Yeah, like give us. It would take very little effort to have some sort of breakup scenario in that case, a scene just to say, hey, look, this isn't working for me anymore. And
even just that you become friends, like you just decide kind of between you, like, yeah, no.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that happens all the time, and it would be a really natural and realistic thing to have.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for me, like, I actually want to expand on what you were saying, Mel. And first off, like, when it comes to you locking into a single relationship, one of the things I think that is really missing is the entire spectrum of relationships. Like, what if you don't want to be in a relationship? Don't let the game force you to be on one. Let's allow for things like asexuality or being aromantic. Um, you know, if they force it on you, then it's a real waste of time. And there aren't a lot of games that would actually force that on you. But if you see one, like, don't do it. Just say, okay, I'd rather go it alone. Um, it's not usually a happy ending when I see that option come up. I keep thinking of Manichemia, where if you don't make like a special friend by the end of the game, I'm not going to tell you what happens, but it's not a pleasant ending for Vane, the main character, if you don't have a special friend by the end of it. Now, thankfully, that is not gendered; it can be whoever, but it's still like, oh my god. But at the same time, like, let's take the spectrum up to 100 as well, and just not lock you into a single relationship. Why can't your main character be polyamorous? Like, you know, in so many RPGs, like, I've been interested in more than a single character that I would have wanted to romance, if but in the end I'm forced to pick one. And no. Like, I remember Persona 3 Fez, where I could basically whore myself out to every single woman in the game if I wanted to. Hopefully just the ones that were of age, because I remember there was one that was a little girl. So God forbid, no, we're not romancing her. But they there were so many and so many that you could do. And then Persona 4 comes along and is like, oh no, we're gonna lock you into a single relationship. And that has been the constant since 4 and 5. Although while 5 says you can get into those relationships, there's a consequence for it, which doesn't mean, I don't know, I just don't like that there's a consequence at the end. So um and at the same time, too, like with a game that has a creative character, let's add some options to that. Let's add things like, what's your sexuality? What is, like Sky was saying, let's put in proper genders. Let's put in all sexuality options, poly, straight, gay, bi, pan, whatever you want. Um, Add all of those things and have it reflect in the world around you. Like, not every other character in the game, not every NPC has to be the same sexuality or have the same interest as you, but it allows for different interactions throughout the game based on your creative character, based on how you want to play it. So, these are some things that I really like to see in bigger games going forward.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I would like to see, like, it's not realistic to have every romanceable character be into something like polyamory. That's just not how it works. But you could have ways to explore polyamorous options, say, you know, assign certain characters in the story who would be okay with being in a polyamorous relationship. The same way you would assign, a sexuality, you have this person, you have this gay man as an option if you're playing as a man. If you're playing as a woman, you have this lesbian as an option, like do the same thing with relationship structures. Monogamy, polyamory, make it a part of things. It'll enrich the game, it'll make it more interesting um and frankly more realistic and less prudish.
And don't make it like the weird thing in Mass Effect where you can sleep with your secretary and no one notices or cares.
Oh god.
Like, you can just fool around and have her strip for you, and it doesn't matter who you're dating. They're just like, that's fine. Just like, she's a person. She's a person.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like, one of the things about romance options is that it's very easy to sink into these very sort of misogynistic tropes and that sort of thing. That's why it's important to put the effort in, because like otherwise you can do some stuff that is just like grotesquely awful to do to another human being in real life.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, so that is going to be it. We have discussed the dating sim RPG hybrid. What do you guys think? What do you guys like about it? What do you guys want to see more of? Hit us up. Let us know. We'd love to hear from you. You can do that to our group email, xpbillionaires@gmail.com, or hit us up on our social media. You can find me on Twitter at billionairesxp and Ray Fegram at Instagram. So, Sky, where can everyone find you?
I'm at SkyKnightXP on Twitter and SkyKnight.xp on Instagram.
And Mel, where can everyone find you?
You can find me you can find me on Instagram at feministgamer or Twitter at feministgamer3, or you can check out my D&D game, which is every Wednesday night, and it's on the Level Up Twitch TV on Steam. Or wait, Twitch?
Awesome. Twitch. Yeah,
Twitch.
that one. That
It's on
guy.
Twitch. That's the platform.
Absolutely. And don't forget to check out xpbillionaires.ca for everything else that we do, which includes written pieces, quickfire reviews, and a recent addition, a weekly release of very interesting gaming articles, which are worth checking out as picked by Sky Knight. So check them out.
Yeah. Okay, so here's what I'm doing. I'm calling it the Weekly RPGs Writing Roundup. And what I do is I go through a bunch of different gaming websites, both specializing in RPGs and not, and pull together all the most interesting opinion features and things like retrospectives and comparative articles. And basically it's all pretty timeless, though some of it will be related to current games industry stuff. And then so I collect it all into one place and post it on the front page of the website. So I just did it for the third year, year, for the third week running, and there's some really interesting stuff there. And feel free to go back through if you're only hearing about this now, because most of it is either still relatively current or simply just timeless. So it's a really good option if you want to read about some interesting RPG related stuff. And the sources I use are also really interesting places to go for gaming information, news, features, etc.
Yeah, definitely. And everything is credited, credit to where the authors are due. So None of this is our work necessarily, so we want to make sure that they get that recognition all the same. So definitely check them out and check out our website to see more of that and everything else that we do. All right, so that's going to be it for us this week. So I hope for Valentine's you can find that special someone or someones so that you can keep gaming together. We'll see you next week.
See ya.
Bye bye.